now the culture, the creativity, the branding, the marketing stuff that I've spent my entire life in now is connected with the technology that I was dying to work with, that I was dying to find ways on which I could work with that, right?
Hello everyone and welcome to the CMO Stories podcast, Season 2, Episode 27. My name is Joeri and I'm your podcast host. And today I'm very excited to be joined by Diego. Diego, how are you?
I'm great, man. I'm stoked. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Me too. Always stoked with podcast episodes. And guys, if you don't know Diego Borgo, I hope I pronounced your name right, Diego, is an advisor for Fortune 500 brands, helping them enter the Metaverse and the NFT space with his decade of expertise in digital marketing. He also consults with venture-backed startups and educates the public on blockchain and NFTs. With 30K followers on LinkedIn, that's impressive. Diego has been featured in more than 70 podcasts already, and he has been nominated as one of the 10 Metaverse experts to follow by WNV, Germany's leading marketing and media portal. So Diego, actually, that was the reason that I invited you for my podcast, because, Web3, Metaverse, that's all I would say all kinds of subjects that I'm talking about with my CMO stories. So perhaps you can explain to us what initially drew you to the world of digital marketing and perhaps more specifically into the Metaverse and the NFT space.
Yeah, I mean, I started working when I was 14 years old. I was always just excited about business in general. I started working out because I had to, but because I really wanted to. So entrepreneurship has always been on my blood. Always trying to figure out how I can look into adding value to things. So the first thing I ever done as a kid, as a flipper, was buying. You remember finger skateboards, the tech decks thing. That you could play skateboard with your finger. So I will go to a place in Brazil, in São Paulo, where I'm from, buy a bunch of those for cheaper, and then put that in a kind of like a toolbox, and then put them, in you have the deck, and you have the wheels, and you have the screws, and you have different things. And I will bring that to school and let people personalize and sort of like customize their own skateboards, and they would pay a premium price because they choose the wheels, they choose everything. And that'll be like the big fever when I was about 14, 15 years old, right? So that kind of like was my first business. But I started working at that age as well as a teacher for people that are wanting to learn about computer, Corel Draw back in the day, Photoshop, all of that. So that was sort of like my first experience within working and entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
But what really drew me into marketing and branding was always the idea of trying to understand why people perceive value on things, right? Why do people look at things the way they do, and why they perceive value on those things, and how you can add value by telling a story or by enhancing the perception that people have to a certain product or service. So that was always something that I was excited about. My first job within that area was an advertisement agency that was helping brands like Samsung, Red Bull, Warner Bros. To enter the so-called gaming universe, right? So back in 2017, esports was not a big thing. Gamers, they used to stay on the basement rather than in the living room, right? So that was a very different perspective on how gaming was. And I was part of that agency on the social media side of things, trying to help them to reach this audience and start with them. So like for me early on, that thing for me was so exciting because I was looking into culture and adoption of early technologies like gaming, cultural element, but also social media as a cultural element back in 2017. And then from there I just went that direction, right? I did a master in marketing, worked a whole career on that thing, on that side, and that's kind of like what got me hooked. On the blockchain side of things, or sort of like on the NFT and Metaverse side of things, I've been in blockchain since 2017. So I first heard of the technology around 2017. I sort of like look into a lot of the elements that are connected to that. And also I was really excited about the use case and the possibilities. But being a brand guy, I was never really deep into the technical elements of it. So I was like, okay, what is in for me here? Not a lot was there because everything was very technical. And the whole thing changed to me when I first heard of NFTs and Web3 and Metaverse. For me, that was a moment that my brain exploded, because I was like, okay, now the culture, the creativity, the branding, the marketing stuff that I've spent my entire life in now is connected to the technology that I was dying to work with, that I was dying to find ways on which I could work with that, right? So that's kind of like a little bit of the journey. I think I said 2017 at the beginning, but I meant 2007. So I'm not that young.
Okay.
And what I meant, when I was working in the agency and the gaming industry, that was 2007. I just turned 34, so I just want to give a correction there, because after I was thinking like, wow, 2017 is like a couple of years ago.
You know what, Diego? The time goes really fast in Web3, but sometimes you can be mistaken. Actually, that was also the moment I started my first company. At that moment, 2006, actually, which was around business intelligence, and then into marketing later on with my second company, and now also into Web3. But you mentioned already a few brands, and in the intro I said you are helping out brands to enter the metaverse space, to enter NFTs and so on. What are some of the challenges that you are seeing these days?
Yeah, so to give the audience a little bit of background. So when I first heard of NFTs and Metaverse and Web3, all of that, it was in May 2021. I was sitting at Adidas, right, in the headquarters in Germany. So I was consulting Adidas for 4 years in digital, so as in the digital department, in different parts of digital, which had nothing to do with NFTs, blockchain, and none of it, unfortunately. And then out of a sudden, because my friends were pushing the brand towards that direction, they brought me into the task force that was planning and helping Adidas to get into the space, and we together delivered into the Metaverse, which was the Adidas NFT collection that was launched in December 2021. So I was part of that core team. We went on and delivered Prada and Adidas, the partnership as well, which was a Web3 partnership that Adidas and Prada did together. Left the brand by December that year, because I wanted to keep doing what I always done, which is helping and consulting and working with big brands, right? So from there, I went to work with Salesforce and helping them launching their NFT cloud. I went on to work with Unilever, helping a couple brands of the group to figure out what is in for them within that space. I had a couple of upskilling sessions with L'Oreal, with MasterCard, and then I went consulting and advising Volkswagen Group as well. So I've been working with Porsche, I've been working with Cupra, I've been working with Skoda, and I'm also right now working with Shell, right? So those are sort of like the brands that I've been working within the sort of like Fortune 500 realm, if you will. And within all of that, to get back to your point, there's always very different elements of the main aspects of what is being difficult for them. But I think if I could list 5, I would say that all over the board, doesn't matter what they're doing, whether it is a collection, whether it's a new technology, whether is looking into a new offering, whatever it is, there's always similar things, right? So the first one is always education, right? And that's why I'm like so big into the space on trying to translate the madness of Twitter and trying to bring the Web3 or blockchain or NFT or metaverse mentality to LinkedIn, especially because the education element of it is what's still lacking like gigantically, right? So education is the first issue, right? So what is happening, what is possible, what is this about, how can we go beyond the headlines that are saying those things, how can we go beyond marketing, how can we go beyond the hype? So that's always the first issue, if you will, or challenge. The second one also comes in with the actual talents that you have availability of talent, if you will. So obviously there are people, and I always say that to start the fire within a Fortune 500 brand, you always need one degen, right? The so-called degen, the people that spend time in the space, the people that have been, buying and selling JPEGs for the last year, but also, really deep understanding the technology and spending a lot of time in Discords and Twitter and all of that. You always just need one of those to start a fire, right? And then they start like talking to others and explaining and creating resources and sharing the information and building talent. But at the early stage of technology as we are, talent is a big issue, right? Because one, the people that really get it, that are really in the space, are either building consulting or not available, right? Not available because maybe they got super lucky and got wealth and now they just don't want to do anything, or they're building because they're excited about the technology, or they are, consulting, helping, working almost like an external partner, like what I do, right? So finding talents is really difficult, especially for brands that want to hire people to come in a corporation, to have a full-time job, to have a salary that, a lot of times is not as appealing as the crazy, potential that you have outside, because you are at the edge of technology, and obviously comes with a lot of risk. The third thing I would say is the machinery, right? If you look into Fortune 500 brands, especially, you're talking about the largest brands in the world, right? You're talking about brands that are making, between, I don't know, 20 to 80, 90 billion in revenue a year. So those are huge tankers, right? Big machines. So what does that mean is that things move slow, right? And the processes are everywhere, and the possibility of doing quick innovation is very difficult, because there's a lot of barriers on the way to make sure that things are done properly to avoid the brand gets in trouble. So it's a good is a sort of like a good and a bad thing sometimes, because it slows brands down, but also ensures that they just don't jump on any hype, right? So in that way is a point. And then fourth one, and I'm almost ready. I'm almost done with that. Fourth one is, I think that the main aspect of legal, treasury, the corporate itself, finance. So how do you operate in a space of, especially Web3, that is such a wild west still when it comes to regulation, when it comes to especially cryptocurrencies, when you want to go down that route, which is how do you bring cryptocurrency in a balance sheet of a public traded company, right? Almost impossible. Now there's many solutions out there that are aiming to solve that issue, but still very difficult, right, for brands to have it in. And when it comes to legal, when it comes to IP, when it comes to GDPR and all of that, like how do you navigate an ecosystem that is so new, and there isn't a lot yet that was explored, and those brands obviously need to do everything by the books because they cannot afford getting in trouble. So that's where we spend a lot of time, and especially when you talk to departments like legal, their main job is to make sure that the brand doesn't get in trouble. Therefore, they say no to a lot of things, especially when there is no precedent or anything that they can look back and say, oh, okay, that brand has done it. They could do it well. They didn't get in trouble. Okay, you can go the same route. So that is a big issue, right? And then the fifth element, I think, is the big picture, is the long-term mentality. Because obviously a lot of those brands are looking to what has been done within the space, especially from a revenue perspective, and trying to look at this as a way for them to cash in right now, which is the worst possible way for you to do when you're looking into innovation, because you're at the start of innovation, right? What I tend to say every time I'm consulting brands is, imagine you're in the mid of the 90s right now. The internet is about to blow up. You have no idea on the potential of the internet and how it's going to disrupt everyone's life in the planet, and all you're concerned about is to make a quick buck, right? So that's something that's still a big challenge, because of course people are looking into ROI. Of course people are looking into headlines. Of course people want to have KPIs or metrics around impressions and media earn and all of that, right? But I try to make them look deeper and bigger than that. And now, thankfully, as the market is evolving, we have already benchmarks of ginormous brands that are doing that, right? Look at what Starbucks is doing, look at what Nike is doing. So those are benchmarks that now are making my life easier, because I can point to them and say, listen, those guys are not trying to make a quick buck. They're looking 10 years down the road.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Diego, I did a survey not so long ago also about the status of the state of Web3 marketing in 2023. And, the issues or the challenges were like the first two that you mentioned. So it was a smaller survey with, also small companies, but they said okay, we need education, and also our consumers or, our audience, they don't understand it. And secondly is we don't have the talent. And then there was also a question about, do you have a Web3 strategy? Most of them were, it was early. They needed
Super
help
early.
to have a strategy. And the ones that had a strategy didn't have the people to implement it. So it's really, confirming what I also see happening. One of the questions in my survey was also about the metaverse. So this is maybe even more earlier. I don't know, Diego, do you also help B2B brands, or are you focused on B2C brands?
Most of the stuff I'm doing is consumer facing, right? So looking a lot on, because I'm coming from branding and marketing and strategy, is almost like a a simple fit. But the potential for the industrial metaverse, as we call, is insane, right? Like it's way beyond the potential for B2C, and it's way more mature than what we can do on B2C right now, right? So even when you look at production lines, or when you look at IoT, or when you look how companies will be interacting with each other in a sphere and exchanging information and intel in a sphere which can be much more enhancing and on spot. I mean, just those 3 or 4 pillars of the potential within those industries is gigantic.
Yeah, I love the metaverse also for networking. At this moment, I'm organizing already events on spatial with marketers. I organized mini TED Talks. Even yesterday we did one. So 3 people came, gave their presentation, and everyone was there. We went from one room to the other, and every speaker room was decorated differently. One time also I did an AI art exhibition. So we voted, with post-its on AI art.
Awesome.
Is networking in the metaverse something that you do in yourself, or that you see your clients do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And just to tap into an element, I think that, to maybe try to take a little bit of the confusion from what the metaverse is, right? And the way I always try to look at it is a very simple way, right? Look at how we communicate digitally, how we connect digitally as humans, right? The metaverse is an evolution of that. Is gonna be an evolution, or it is already an evolution of how we connect and communicate digitally as a species, right? That's simple, right? So you can add millions of technicalities and complexities to that, but the punchline is this thing is aimed at helping us to connect and communicate better digitally. Okay, so looking at that, there is a very interesting way on how you can think of the evolution of that communication, right? The first one, and you might be around the same age than I, so you will remember, we communicated through text, right? We had ICQ, we had MSN Messenger, and that was how we connected in the internet, right? I couldn't see each other, we couldn't exchange files. Files came a bit later, so we could send photos and all of it. But the beginning was chat rooms, forums. That's it, right? And then the second evolution of that was text and video, audio and video, where we are right now. For example, you and I, we are connecting digitally in the internet as humans through video and audio, right? So that's what we're doing. Obviously, text is still part of it. But what I think is super exciting, why the metaverse is an evolution of that interface, is that now we are amplifying that connection into a space of avatars and 3D words, which is exactly what you just said, right? So super cool. So think about, instead of me being represented by myself as a human, I can be represented by an avatar. So you amplify the potential of so many things, right? Can be like, you can be anything you want to be, actually, right? Almost like in a game. You can be any character or whatever, which is super cool. Or you can be yourself, which is, also great. And the other thing is that you go into immersive worlds, right? Meaning you can have a much closer interaction with people as we would be almost in the same room. And when you talk about spatial and you're hosting events there, you already feel and experience that, because that's exactly what it is, right? So to your point on the networking in the metaverse, I have a masterclass on how brands should enter the metaverse and the NFT space, which when we do the graduation, we do that in the metaverse. We do that on spatial. We bring 50 people together, and we're like, you guys been spending together and time together, learning through, and now here's a space for you to spend an hour networking, talking to each other, learning more about each other. And then people have their camera on, they have the mic on, and they have the avatar, and they walk around, they go in different rooms. So super exciting. A lot of times when I have meetings with clients, instead of sending like a Zoom or a Google Meet or a Teams link, I send a spatial link, right? And we go there and we meet there. A lot of the interviews I've given was from the metaverse, right? Which is exciting, because if you get an interviewer coming and want to talk about the metaverse, why would you do that on Zoom? Right? If the
Right.
metaverse is really out there, why don't you do that in the metaverse? So I'm doing that myself. I see a lot of it. I see the potential. I see a lot of use case already out there on people already exploring it. So I'm really excited about that, because taking out all the layer of technologies and VR and all of it, like, is just a simple way on how we're going to evolve the way we connect as humans. That's what's it. From there, it can become extremely complex and enhancing. But if you take that as a bottom line, you're going to make much easier for you to understand what's happening.
Right. I love it how you explain that. It's also a way to build community, of course, real community, to have it people belong to community. And instead of going on Zoom, they see each other on spatial, in the metaverse. There are a few metaverses, of course. I'm also wondering, Diego, I guess you have like a paid spatial account, because that no one can enter in the room while you are doing this, or are you not locking your rooms?
Yeah, I do have a paid account in Spatial, premium version of it, and I also have purchased an NFT that it created the entire sort of like environment
Yeah.
for me, right? And then I lock that, and I can gate that, token gate that. I don't want to get too technical because I don't know how much
No,
the audience knows. You can token gate that through smart contracts and NFTs to say, if you have this NFT, then you can come in, right? So it's
yeah.
basically a token gated experience.
So that was just, for my audience, most of them know, so about NFTs and the metaverse and so on. And so it's interesting concept that you can use an NFT as access with utilities, and in this case, to your course and to your room on Spatial. But what I also find
the
interesting...
NFT, just to keep building on that, the NFT in this case doesn't have to be a complex NFT, right? Everybody's like, oh, it's going to be a PFP, or it can be a POAP, right? POAP, proof of attendance protocol, for me is the best example on how you can make this simple for everyone, for free, that people can claim with email, that people can claim with wallet, and you can token gate stuff, because POAP is an NFT.
Exactly. Yes, actually, the results of my survey, they're also available. Just if you buy an NFT directly, you get access to a PDF. So it's actually work a bit the same. What I also find interesting is, you have your avatar on Spatial. I'm using my Ready Player Me avatar. But because of all these different metaverses, you don't have the same avatar everywhere. Do you have like
let's say the word together: interoperability?
It's a difficult word for me to pronounce.
I know.
Do you see evolutions on that side, Diego?
It's a hard one. It's a really hard one, because I've been trying to get my heads around, talking to so many different people. Obviously the dreamers, the builders, the technicians, everyone, and nobody has like a clear direction. I think within all of what's happening, Ready Player Me is a great example of how that layout is being applied, because the more metaverse platforms I go to, the more I see that they are sort of like leaning against that capability from Red Player Me. So that's great from an avatar perspective. But then, I mean, it goes very difficult when it comes to different items. How you're gonna sort of like represent ownership of digital assets within different metaverses, especially not just because of everyone building their silos in a time that we should be building open source and connected and integrated with others, but also because of the difference of the sort of like the resolution and quality of it, right? So if you think about voxels like Sandbox, there is no way you're going to bring the same asset or the same thing to a place like Spatial, which is more hi-fi. So that's kind of like obviously one of the issues. For sure, you can create conversion for files. You can create a bunch of different files that are exactly the same thing and have different extensions, let's say, that allow you to navigate with almost the same thing into different spaces. But I think that as much difficult as it was to create a unique pattern around the web to be able to build one internet, I think we're going to struggle way more to do that with the metaverse, because it adds a ginormous layer of complexity as soon as you start looking into visuals, right? And digital elements and virtual worlds, because then the sphere is much wider, right? The possibilities of what you can make is much, much, much wider. So I don't have a very clear answer on how this thing is evolving, because I think is a ginormous black
Yeah, I
hole,
know.
and I'm not so deep into what is being built per se within each platform and the technicalities of it. But I definitely see as a major issue that it's going to be a very hard one to overcome.
Yeah. What is or are perhaps the metaverses that you spend the most time on for yourself, or that you see your clients on? Is
Yeah,
that spatial?
spatial for me is great. I love spatial. I don't work with the company. I have no connections with them. I just
Yeah.
love it because it's so simple. The fact that you don't need to bring your wallet in, the fact that you can just start without having to log in. You can have the web to log in through any social platform or Gmail. Then you can also have the Web3 login with a
Mm.
Connect wallet. You can hold NFTs. You can token gate experiences. I find it to be very compelling. I really enjoy the quality of the platform so far. So it looks good to me. It's intuitive when I'm walking around. Feels something that I really want to spend time on. I've tried many, many, many different ones, and a lot of times either you can do a lot and becomes too much. When I look at like Sandbox and Decentraland, like you can do so much in there that sometimes I'm like overwhelmed, right? Or you cannot do much, right? And then you're kind of like, oh, I'm disappointed. Like I was expecting this to be a bit, more developed. And I think spatial so far has found the sweet spot of being between the two, which so far is interesting and exciting for me to see.
Right. Perhaps another question for people for whom the metaverse and Web3 of NFTs are new. I know you have your course, but what would you advise people that enter the space? Do you have like best practices that they could do to start?
Yeah, the best advice I would give is what I've learned through a lot of hard work. So that's coming from experience, which is you have to find a horizontal approach to it, meaning try to understand in a high level what all those technologies mean in a high level. So what does blockchain mean, right? How does it work in a super high level? What are NFTs? How does it work? What are the use cases? What is DeFi? Why it was created? Why does it matter? What is happening in that space? What is decentralized autonomous organizations? Why does it matter? What's happening there? What is the potential? What are metaverse? What are avatars? Blah, blah. Try to learn all of that from A to Z in a very high level that gives you an understanding and a grasp of what's actually happening before you start diving into a vertical. And before you start diving into a vertical, which is where it gets the most overwhelming, is find something that you're already passionate about that's going to become much easier for you to, one, spend your time learning and being part of, but two, that's going to make it easier for you to find a niche on which, if you want to pursue a career or create content or build a company or anything within, you're going to have a major advantage, because we are so early that whatever you do within certain verticals, you'll still be in one of the first few to do something there, right? So if fashion is your thing, fashion. If automotive, if football, if cooking, if education, if healthcare, like that's what I'm saying, right? Like dive into that vertical with a clear understanding of the ecosystem, a good understanding, but not too deep. Otherwise, you're going to spend years in it because it's complex. But then dive deep into that vertical and spend most of your time there. Otherwise, you're going to get overwhelmed. If you're like, oh, I want to learn about everything that's happening, like I am overwhelmed because I have to learn about all of it, right? How many newsletters I'm signed up, how many podcasts I listen to when I'm at the gym, when I'm driving around. Like
Yeah,
it is overwhelming, but that's the job I've chosen because I'm being more on the generalist side of things, right? But if you
yeah,
have the possibility of diving deep and finding a niche, like go for it.
yeah. Well, Diego, I think that's a really good advice to end our podcast with. If people want to connect with you, if they want to know more about your course, where would you like to send them to?
Yeah, so if you want to get closer to me, LinkedIn is the place. So go to LinkedIn and type Diego Borgo, Borgo, and there you're going to find a pink alien as my avatar and hit me up. That's me. If you want to learn about the course and the masterclass that I've done, go to nas.io/Diego. There you're going to find everything you need to know about the course and everything that's available in there.
Awesome. Of course, we will put all these links in the show notes. So thank you so much, Diego. It was fun having you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm stoked.
So, guys, if you're listening to this podcast episode and you're interested, about around Web3 and what he talks about with the metaverse and stuff and all these possibilities, go and follow Diego on LinkedIn, like I did. And also, if you think about people around you that could benefit from this podcast episode, be sure to share this podcast episode with them. And if you're not already subscribed to our CMO Stories podcast, please do that. And of course, I would like to see you back for the next podcast episode. Bye.